Okay, we are going to learn how to graph an absolute value function, and there's a number of ways to do it. You can use your calculator, which I'll show you in a few minutes, but probably the easiest way, it's even easier than using your calculator, is to understand that there are things that every function does, and this applies to every function that we will start graphing. It applies to lines that you've been doing already, quadratic equations that we'll be doing, quadratic functions. But in this case, we're dealing with absolute value function. Now, an absolute value function is written like this. Y equals the absolute value of x, or f of x equals the absolute value of x. When you graph a function like this, if we could create a t-chart, if we wanted to, like this, and put values of x and y in here, and we could put in like a 0, and we put in a 0, we get out a 0. Put in a 1, absolute value of 1 is 1. We put in a -1, we get a positive 1, and so forth. If we put in a 2, we'd get a 2. If we put in a -2, we get a positive 2. So what ends up happening is it does look like a line this direction, and you start plotting these points, you get this. But what happens is anything that is negative becomes positive. So these values become positive, and your graph then goes uphill in this way. So it's a V-graph. This is often referred to as a V-graph, the absolute value graph. So that's what that graph would look like. As it has a vertex, we refer to the vertex as this point right here, right at the origin. Okay? Now, what happens, and I'll change pens here, is if we add things to it like this. Now look where this 3 is. It's outside of the absolute value. This causes a shift up and down, or a translation, often referred to as a translation or shift. It moves the graph up or down, and it moves it just like its sign right here, +3. So it's going to go up 1, 2, 3. And it's going to continue to have the same slope. This line will have a slope of 1 like this. So that causes a shift up and down. Now I'll change pens again here. Look when the 3 is inside the function. When it's inside the absolute values, this actually causes a shift right and left. Okay? This is referred to as a horizontal shift. This one up here again is referred to as a vertical shift. Okay? So this shifts it up and down. When it's inside, it shifts it right and left. So, and it's opposite its sign. It's kind of weird, but it's what makes it 0, because it'll be 0, it'll touch this axis. So a +3, this is going to shift it to the right, 1, 2, 3. Again, the graph will still go up 1 over 1, so it's going to be a graph that looks like this in blue. So that's what this graph will do, is it shifts it right 3. This graph shifts it up 3. Now, the one in pencil here, this is called a stretch or a shrink. When we have a value in front of this, we stretch or we shrink it. In this case, it will actually stretch it because it changes the slope. Like a linear line, when we had a number in front of x, it was the slope. This is 2 over 1. So it's still centered at the origin because there's no shifts on it. There's no add 3s or subtract 5s or whatever. So we're centered at the origin, but now our graph, instead of this black one, it's going to go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. So the graph is now going to be quite a bit steeper. Okay, and the bigger this number, obviously, the steeper this thing's going to get. And we refer to that as a shrink. So when x is greater than 0, it will shrink it. When x is, not 0, 1, x is greater than 1, it will shrink it. And when x is less than 1, it will shrink it, okay, or stretch it, meaning make it a really wide graph. So let's look at like this particular one here in black now. Now this has everything on it. It has a vertical shift, so we would shift down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Has a horizontal shift, right and left, and this one's going to go left 3, so 1, 2, 3. There's my vertex point. That's where things are going to start. That's going to be this point where the bottom or top of the V. Now, this 2 is a slope, so it's going to go up 2 and over 1, but in this case it's got a negative, so it's going to go down 2 and over 1, down 2 and over 1, and boom, we have a line that goes this way. So you can see how these things shift them around. We can do all kinds of crazy things. Let's try in another one. Let's put a 1/5 absolute value of x. Let's put +5 and let's put +2. So this one now shifts it up 2, 1, 2. This is my vertical shift up and down. This is my left and right shift, 5 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's my vertex. as you can see there. And now my slope is a positive 1/5. So we go up 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Up 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so now you can see how we showed that it will stretch the graph. It makes it really wide. So as you can see, those are some of the different shifts and different things that you can do with that. So as you graph these, basically those are the things that you will be doing. There is one little trick to this. Let me draw one more and then I'll post this for you. Okay, let's say I have y equals the absolute value of like 2x minus 5 plus 1. Well, this is a shift that shifts it up and down, up 1. But now we have a number in front of here. Instead of in front of here, it's in front of here. So our actual shift horizontally is this number, 5, negative 5, divided by this number, which is 2. But again, it's opposite this sign, so it's plus 5. So we shift up 1. Now that 5 halves is 2.5, so we would shift to the left, or to the right, 2.5 right there. There's my vertex. My value in front of here times this value will determine my slope. So we are still going to go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, and we'll have a steeper slope like that. So this is the only one that's tricky, is when both of those numbers are in there. Now you can do this on a calculator. Let me just show you the keystrokes for a calculator so you can see this really quickly. First of all, you've got to go into your graph, which is this y equals button. Hopefully you have your calculator with you. In there you can just clear out whatever graphs are in there. Now in there, if we want to do an absolute value one, for example, let's say I wanted to do this one right here. I'm going to have to, I go to my math option, so math, and then I go over to numbers. See the numbers right here? And it has an ABS, and I can hit 1 or hit enter. And it puts an ABS in there, so now I can hit 2. Here's where your x variable is located. You hit x minus, put your minus in. Okay, so minus 5, put into parentheses, and then put plus 1. Okay, now if I hit that, I see the graph button right up here. I hit graph. Now sometimes your graph may be, depending on who's been playing with your calculator, it might be messed up. So you might have to go to zoom. Let me just show you. Hit zoom, and you'd want to hit this zoom standard, number 6. It'll put your graph back to normal pattern, so that if yours is all messed up, it won't work. But if you notice, that's very similar to the graph that I just graphed on the paper. Look where it's located. We shifted up 1, we're over 2.5, and it opened up fairly steeply. So you can graph pretty much any of these on your calculator that you're new to, and some of the problems on there ask you to graph them on your calculator. So again, let me review how you do that. It's in the y equals, you go to there, okay, you clear out everything you have. In your math options, you go to numbers, you go to absolute value right here, and then you can enter whatever kind of absolute value graph you might have. For example, let's enter this just x minus 3 simple one up here. So we put in our x, here's our x value again, right? Right here's where our x is located, minus 3, into parentheses, hit our graph button, you can see that that's just been shifted to the right 3 units as we indicated. So if you forget which way these things shift, okay, you can look on a graph and see, or I mean on a calculator and see. Now again, if it's outside, it shifts it vertically up and down, just the way the sign is. If it's inside with the x, it shifts it right and left, horizontal, and it shifts it opposite this sign. Remember, a number in front of the absolute value causes a stretch or a shrink. If x is less than 1, it causes a stretch. If x is greater than 1, it causes a shrink. And so that kind of is, and it holds for all kinds of functions. In the graphs you're going to be doing, they're just absolute value functions for the most part. I think there is one sine graph that's kind of weird. It's kind of an oscillating graph, but it does the same thing. It shifts it up, down, just based on these particular things. So good luck. Hopefully you can do these.